the tavern on the shores of Rice Lake, where we were to pass the night, so that I lost something of the beautiful scenery which this fine expanse of water presents as you descend the plains towards its shores. The glimpses I caught of it were by the faint but frequent flashes of lightning that illuminated the horizon to the north, which just revealed enough to make me regret I could see no more that night. The Rice Lake is prettily diversified with small wooded islets. The north bank rises gently from the water's edge. Within sight of Sully, the tavern from which the steamboat starts that goes up the Otonabee, you see several well cultivated settlements, and beyond the Indian village the missionaries have a school for the education and instruction of the Indian children. Many of them can both read and write fluently, and are greatly improved in their moral and religious conduct. They are well and comfortably clothed, and have houses to live in, but they are still too much attached to their wandering habits to become good and industrious settlers. During certain seasons they leave the village and encamp themselves in the woods along the borders of those lakes and rivers that present the most advantageous hunting and fishing grounds. The Rice Lake and Mud Lake Indians belong, I am told, to the Chippewas; but the traits of cunning and warlike ferocity that formerly marked this singular people seem to have disappeared beneath the milder influence of Christianity. Certain it is that the introduction of the Christian religion is the first greatest step towards civilization and improvement, its very tendency being to break down the strongholds of prejudice and ignorance, and unite mankind in one bond of social brotherhood. I have been told that for some time drunkenness was unknown, and even the moderate use of spirits was religiously abstained from by all the converts. This abstinence is still practised by some families, but of late the love of ardent spirits has again crept in among them, bringing discredit upon their faith. It is indeed hardly to be wondered at, when the Indian sees those around him that call themselves Christians, and who are better educated and enjoy the advantages of civilized society, indulging to excess in this degrading vice, that he should suffer his natural inclination to overcome his Christian duty, which might in some have taken no deep root. I have been surprised and disgusted by the censures passed on the erring Indian by persons who were foremost in indulgence at the table and the tavern, as if the crime of drunkenness were more excusable in the man of education than in the half reclaimed savage. There are some fine settlements on Rice Lake, but I am told the shores are not considered healthy, the inhabitants being subject to lake fevers and ague, especially where the ground is low and swampy. These fevers and agues are supposed by some people to originate in the extensive rice beds, which cause a stagnation in the water, the constant evaporation from the surface acting on a mass of decaying vegetation must tend to have a bad effect on the constitution of those that are immediately exposed to its pernicious influence. Besides numerous small streams, here called creeks, two considerable rivers, the Otonabee and the Trent, find an outlet for their waters in the Rice Lake. These rivers are connected by a chain of small lakes, which you may trace on any good map of the province. I send you a diagram which has been published at Cobourg, which will give you the geography of this portion of the country. It is on one of these small lakes we propose purchasing land, which, should the navigation of these waters be carried into effect, as is generally supposed to be in contemplation, will render the lands on their shores very advantageous to the settlers. At present they are interrupted by large blocks of granite and limestone, rapids and falls, which prevent any but canoes or flat bottomed boats from passing on them, and even these are limited to certain parts on account of the above named obstacles. By deepening the bed of the river and lakes, and forming locks in some parts of the canals, the whole sweep of these waters might be thrown open to the Bay of Quinte. The expense, however, would necessarily be great, and till the townships of this portion of the district be fully settled, it is hardly to be expected that so vast an undertaking should be effected, however desirable it may be. We left the tavern at Rice Lake, after an unusual delay, at 9 o'clock. The morning was damp, and a cold wind blew over the lake, which appeared to little advantage through the drizzling rain, from which I was glad to shroud my face in my warm plaid cloak, for there was no cabin or other shelter in the little steamer than an inefficient awning. This apology for a steamboat formed a considerable contrast with the superbly appointed vessels we had lately been passengers in on the Ontario and the St. Lawrence. But the circumstance of a steamer at all on the Otonabee was a matter of surprise to us, and of exultation to the first settlers along its shores, who for many years had been contented with no better mode of transport than a scow or a canoe for themselves and their marketable produce, or through the worst possible roads with a waggon or sleigh. The Otonabee is a fine, broad, clear stream, divided into two mouths at its entrance to the Rice Lake by a low tongue of land, too swampy to be put under cultivation. This beautiful river, for such I considered it to be, winds its way between thickly wooded banks, which rise gradually as you advance higher up the country. Towards noon the mists cleared off, and the sun came forth in all the brilliant beauty of a September day. So completely were we sheltered from the wind by the thick wall of pines on either side, that I no longer felt the least inconvenience from the cold that had chilled me on crossing the lake in the morning. To the mere passing traveller, who cares little for the minute beauties of scenery, there is certainly a monotony in the long and unbroken line of woods, which insensibly inspires a feeling of gloom almost touching on sadness. Still there are objects to charm and delight the close observer of nature. His eye will be attracted by fantastic bowers which are formed by the scarlet creeper, or Canadian ivy, and the wild vine, flinging their closely entwined wreaths of richly tinted foliage from bough to bough of the forest trees, mingling their hues with the splendid rose tipped branches of the soft maple, the autumnal tints of which are unrivalled in beauty by any of our forest trees at home. The purple clusters of the grape, by no means so contemptible in size as I had been led to imagine, look tempting to my longing eyes, as they appear just ripening among these forest bowers. I am told the juice forms a delicious and highly flavoured jelly, boiled with sufficient quantity of sugar. The seeds are too large to make any other preparation of them practicable. I shall endeavour at some time or another to try the improvement that can be effected by cultivation. One is apt to imagine where nature has so abundantly bestowed fruits, that is the most favourable climate for their attaining perfection with the assistance of culture and soil. The waters of the Otonabee are so clear and free from impurity that you distinctly see every stone pebble or shell at the bottom. Here and there an opening in the forest reveals some tributary stream, working its way beneath the gigantic trees that meet above it. The silence of the scene is unbroken but by the sudden rush of the wild duck, disturbed from its retreat among the shrubby willows that in some parts fringe the left bank, or the shrill cry of the kingfisher as it darts across the water. The steamboat puts in for a supply of firewood at a clearing about half way from Peterborough, and I gladly availed myself of the opportunity of indulging my inclination for gathering some of the splendid cardinal flowers that grew among the stones by the river's brink. Here, too, I plucked as sweet a rose as ever graced an English garden. I also found among the grass of the meadowland spearmint, and, nearer to the bank, peppermint. There was a bush resembling our hawthorn, which, on examination, proved to be the cockspur hawthorn, with fruit as large as cherries, pulpy, and of a pleasant tartness, not much unlike to tamarinds. The thorns of this tree were of formidable length and strength. I should think it might be introduced with great advantage to form live fences. The fruit, too, would prove by no means contemptible as a preserve. As I felt a great curiosity to see the interior of a log house, I entered the open doorway of the tavern. as the people termed